Hello and welcome to the local connection of Norwegian developers at Microsoft Build 2022. My name is Maxim Salnikov. I lead developer relations for Microsoft Norway. And today we'll talk about upgrading Azure Kubernetes service. This is local connection session, so I invited cloud experts from our local Norwegian company, but what we introduce today is absolutely relevant to the global audience, so bear with us. And before I ask my guests to introduce themselves, a reminder for you folks, this is live session, so we are streaming live from city of Oslo, capital of Norway, from Microsoft office, and let's make this a dialogue. Please feel free to send questions using Q&A part of Teams, and if you have some minutes left, we'll do our best to answer these questions. Ask about AKS, ask about Kubernetes in general, ask about Azure. We'll try to answer everything. Now, time to introduce my dear guests. Folks, tell a few words about yourselves, Per and Sven.
Yes, thank you, Maxim. My name is Per Bøhler. I work in Vipps Norway. I'm currently the tech lead of our cloud team there, and I have hands-on experience in all the AKS upgrade scenarios that we are going to discuss with you guys today. And I'm really grateful that when Microsoft invited us, and Sven in particular, they also included me to have this talk for you guys and join you in MS Build today.
My name is Sven Malvik, and I'm the team leader of this cloud team where we work entirely with Azure. And I've now worked with Azure for about 4 years or so. And I like to talk about those Azure services. So I created my own community as well and got nominated and awarded by an MVP, as an Azure MVP by Maxim. And then I talk a lot about Azure API management, and I wrote a book. The name is Mastering Azure API Management, which you can buy online on Amazon as well.
Cool. Thanks for coming, folks. And you mentioned the name of the company you work in, and I have zero doubts that all attendees from Norway, they know Vipps well. We use Vipps very actively, almost every day. But for our global audience, could you briefly introduce your company? What's the scale? What's technical solutions? What can you say about Vipps?
Yeah, sure. So the thing that you already mentioned is that the Norwegians know know Vipps very well. We are a population of about 5.5 million people in Norway, and it's over 4 million people that use our services on a daily basis, which is quite a high number. So really everybody is using this. So, but what do we actually do in Vipps? Vipps is a payment service. And usually when I want to transfer money to Maxim, for example, what I need to do is I need his bank account number. Now with Vipps, you don't need the bank account number. The only thing you need is the cell phone number, which makes it very easy to send money to anybody in the entire Norwegian population, because everybody has a phone and everybody has Vipps. At the same time, I can pay my bills, invoices that I get from any bank in Norway, or they will reside in the Vipps app. But the coolest thing I like the most is that you can buy stuff online in a shop that you have never met before. And the Vipps app is automatically connected. It knows everything about you. You can log in, you can pay with it. So, which is quite great. Vipps is, I think, the third times in a row the most recommended brand in Norway. And considering that we're talking about a payment service, which is supposed to be super boring, but people in Norway, we like to pay our stuff more than we like watching films on Netflix or listening to music to Spotify. And this is very funny. So We are talking about the Norwegian population, the entire Norwegian population that is using this service. Now, 17th of May, that was last week, we had our National Independence Day, where everybody, literally everybody is going out and eating ice cream and buying hot dogs and stuff like that. So on that particular day, we had about 2.5 million transactions, which is quite a lot. About the normal day, we have about the half. So that is the amount of traffic that is going through our cloud native Azure presence. When we take a look a bit more closely, what we have is on the left side, we have our API consumers. This is Vip's app basically, but also a lot of merchants. They get the IP address from the application gateway through the traffic manager. We have the web application firewall installed or enabled, the DDoS plan, stuff like that. And then all the APIs that we have in the entire WIPS, which is about 100 or more APIs that are located in Azure API Management. We're very happy with that. And from there, the requests are directed to our Azure Kubernetes service that we have. All those applications are running there. Now, consider this, the entire Norwegian population is using this service. That means Kubernetes service must work, always. But the thing is here, you see the version number, 1.21. Now this version number can change depending on the Kubernetes version. When that happens, we have to do something. We are responsible for upgrading this service. It's our mission to do this. Now you know that upgrading a service on your machine is not always super easy. That happens, errors, problems occur. And that's something that we are a bit concerned about when we upgrade our AKS in this super mission critical environment. The financial authorities consider us as a critical infrastructure in Norway, so there cannot be any downtime at all.
Yeah, it sounds like you use Azure at scale, you provide services at scale, and it's mission critical. So what could go wrong with upgrading Kubernetes? So what are the challenges? Because from what I've seen on Azure portal, it's just like drop down with versions and looked pretty simple, but share your experience.
Yeah, absolutely, Maxim. Yes, what can go wrong, right? You just click in the portal in the cloud, it's all super easy and simple. But unfortunately, many things can go wrong. I'm going to share with you guys some of our experience, but before I do that, I want to just briefly go through the process of an AKS upgrade. So when you press that button, Maxim, the first thing, the control plane of Kubernetes is upgraded. You can't really do anything else than sit back, watch, wait, and hope everything goes well. Microsoft fixes this for us. This is the managed part of AKS. But then the worker nodes are upgraded. And as you can see on the left here, we have a cluster as 2 nodes in this example. The first node, first a node is added to this cluster. It's a buffer node. It's on the new upgraded Kubernetes version. When that is made available to the cluster, then the first one of your existing nodes are cordoned and drained, then patched and restarted. Then the second node, etc., until the entire cluster is upgraded. Really nice and easy. It at least sounds like that. Now, many things can, of course, go wrong here. We'll share 3 experiences or issues that we have experienced when we upgraded AKS. We do that Sunday. It's midnight in our change window, and we hope everything will go well. Now, the first example here is related to application startup failures. So in our cluster, we were using a config server running as a deployment. It's a Spring Boot config server in which all our other applications are dependent on when they are starting up. Now this config server was poorly configured. There were 2 things. First, the liveness probe in the deployment wasn't really configured at all, had a default value. And the the config server had a really long startup time. And how did this affect the upgrade process? Well, when the nodes are upgraded, the config server pods are moved, so they are restarted. And when the config server was starting up, the long startup time was longer than Kubernetes wanted to wait because of the liveness problem. So the config server pods were restarted before they were up and in a running state. This happened to all the config server pods because in the upgrade process, once we have started it, all nodes are patched. And of course, our applications, the same thing happens there. And then the config server was in a loop being restarted. Applications were waiting for the config server to come up. And basically the result was all our services were down. Now you might say this is not AKS's fault. This is root cause was human errors, poor configuration. But as we all know, human errors, they do occur. And when we started the upgrade of AKS, that made this error visible, and the consequences were services were down. Okay, second example here related to resource limits. So we were experiencing this, learning the hard way again. We were upgrading, sitting there midnight on a Monday morning. Control plane was upgraded. Everything looked really nice, but nothing was happening after the control plane was upgraded. Then we were looking for the buffer node to be created. Nothing. We didn't see any pods being moved, etc. We were researching the logs, and then we see a log saying, cannot add buffer node, not enough available CPUs. Not enough available CPUs, you might ask. That's exactly what we ask, because we are in the cloud here. We're in the cloud. We don't want to worry about available CPUs, right? Memories, all this stuff is there. It's just there. But anyways, we see we can't upgrade. We are in a inconsistent state. Control plane is upgraded. Nodes are not. They're on a different Kubernetes version. Then we learn, as I said, the hard way here. There is actually a resource limit on number of CPUs available on a subscription level, as you see on the slide here. So we didn't have enough available CPUs in this subscription, couldn't add the buffer node, then upgrade stopped. The consequences in this case was services were still running, but we were in an inconsistent state, so we had to fix that, but at least our services were up. Our third example here is related to the nodes. Both hardware or software failures can occur. Nodes and the control plane are very similar. As I mentioned, Microsoft upgrades the control plane for us. If something goes wrong there, you can't really do anything else than contact Microsoft support. They will help you. It's similar with the nodes. So when a node is upgraded, it's restarted, and it comes up. If it shows a faulty state, then you can't really do anything else than do damage control. You have to cordon and drain, make sure you have no pods running there, but you have to wait for Microsoft support, which can be frustrating because you want to fix things yourself, right? Another thing is that you can get software-related errors on the nodes. This one we painfully experienced as well. Again, sitting there in the midnight in the change window, we upgraded, pressed the button to upgrade AKS. Control plane was upgraded. Everything was fine. Buffer node was added. Worker node started to upgrade one by one. And we were in a really good mood this time. Things were going well. Sven sitting over here trying to have a good time, telling us a joke while we are waiting. Then all of a sudden, as Sven is about to hit this big point, my colleague says, we have errors in the application logs. And we start looking, debugging, what's going on? We have multiple applications with errors, but only some pods in a deployment had errors. Now we were able to find out that the errors occurred on pods were all running on the same node. So again, this node was faulty. What can we do? Not much. We moved the pods away. We drained this node. And we could see from the errors that there was a problem with managed identities. So we are using managed identities to connect to all our external Azure resources like storage accounts, database servers, key vaults. But this was not working on this particular node. Now, we had to contact Microsoft support to get help. We made sure we weren't using this node, so our services was up and running. We didn't get any downtime, but we had to wait for Microsoft's help. And in this particular case, they could tell us that it was the Azure provider daemon on the node didn't start up after the upgrade. We did restarts of the nodes, etc. Nothing helped. So we, in the end, had to delete the node on the recommendation from Microsoft. And as I said, consequences in this particular case, not that big either, but it's very frustrating when you can't fix problems like this yourself.
Yeah, so when you call Microsoft support, Microsoft will definitely help, but of course it's better to avoid all possible failures, all possible errors, so not get to that level. So what could be the solutions? What are possible solutions to avoid the challenge you mentioned?
Yeah, so what are the possible solutions you can do? So as we think, there are at least 3 strategies you can follow when upgrading AKS. And we found them also after discussing a lot with Microsoft. So the first one is very simple. That's what we have done all the time. So we're going into the Azure portal, super simple, choosing our AKS cluster, going to the cluster configuration, and then we just click the version that we would like to have. Very simple. And then you basically wait it out. Now, this worked for us great in the beginning when we didn't have that much workload on those clusters. And we also had just one node pool. That's it. So that worked fine for us. It wasn't risky at that time, but it became super risky when the amount of services were increased drastically and the traffic were increased. The second way of upgrading AKS is by upgrading node pools. So instead of one node pool, we have many node pools. So in this particular example, you have, for example, on the left side, the system node pool, where you have some monitoring pods or something like that's not your applications, and they just require a low-level VM. So we went for the B8 in this example. Now then you have the node pool 1, where you have general purpose applications that in this case run with the D8S, general purpose VM type. This works quite well. Now, the third one, the node pool 2, with applications that require a bit more CPU and memory. They run on H8, the high availability VM type. Those applications can't run on the other node pool VM types, the general purpose or the simpler one, the B8, which means if this node pool fails, we have to have at least the same node pool or better one more time. That in itself doesn't increase any risk, of course, but here comes the thing. There's the control plane, and this control plane is not managed by us, it's managed by Microsoft. So the risk here is when this control plane, this upgrade fails, and it can happen, then you cannot interact with the Kubernetes API anymore. That means any security incidents or anything that you have right now and that must go out immediately cannot work. So you are basically screwed. And this is a risk at that time that we didn't want to have. So we thought, what can be an alternative option? The third option. And this is not an upgrade option at all. It's just saying, you know what? We have this current AKS cluster and this needs to be upgraded. But what if we just create a new AKS cluster? That's it. And then we just move over all those applications and make a switch, and then we are done. So in this case, we have Azure API Management in front. And there it's very easy to just switch to another cluster. So the only thing you have to do is to export and import all the workload from the one cluster to the next cluster. That's it, in theory. So looking at this side by side, on the left side, we have the one node pool upgrade from the portal. Doesn't involve any complexity because you just switch a button and then click a button and you're done. The cost is low, at least not higher, because you don't add anything. But the risk is super high, as Pierre has mentioned. On the other extreme is provisioning a new AKS cluster. The complexity is high, very high, because you have to make this happen. You have to have the same AKS configuration like the one before. That means you need infrastructure as code. Now, when you start with Azure, you might not have this. But when you are running a mission critical environment, you have it. You must have it. So you need to work on this. The cost is quite high because everything is redundant in terms of AKS and it needs to be tested as well. So you need some manpower. And then we have the one in the middle, node pools, where everything is basically in the middle. You have some increased complexity, some more cost, and the risk is somehow in the middle. So the question is what we went for. And we said, you know what? We don't like risk. We cannot afford risk. So we had to go for provisioning a new AKS cluster. But then we said to us, okay, we have this infrastructure as code everywhere. Not everywhere, sorry, for AKS, because we needed it. But let's have it for everywhere. I mean, you have to have it anyway. So let's just do it and make it clean and make it great. And once you have that, you're saying, okay, what is this immutable infrastructure, what we are doing for Azure Kubernetes Service? Isn't that something that we should apply to the entire infrastructure? I mean, we have it. It's just clicking a button and running the code, and you have all those resources. The only thing you need to do is a backup and restore from AKS. At that time, also Azure API management, cross-regional units weren't available at that time. We made that happen. And then after a while, we had our second cluster running there. So now, the hard work now is to get all the applications and APIs over to the new one and then test them. But it's a risky operation because still we need to test it, right? So what we did, we said, okay, let's meet the entire platform team, just 7 people roundabout, on a Sunday evening, midnight to Monday morning, and make this switch happen. So we did. But, and here's the but, we needed, of course, people that knew the workload, those that can test the final solution, but because there are always some differences, even though you have infrastructure as code, you need to make sure that everything happens. So all the testers from all those teams were there, maybe 5 people or so. But then things can also happen. Nothing works smoothly, even though not if you have this case here. So you need some domain experts from the payment area, for example. And we had some of them in our meeting as well. So at the end, we ended up with about 20 people or so at midnight. It was super fun. I must say that. We had a lot of fun and did all the work, last about 3 hours. So the question then is this something to do many times? I mean, every time a new AKS is upgraded, it is really hard work to organize all this stuff and to get all the people from all the teams, convince them and saying to them it's a good thing to be awake at midnight on a Sunday when your family is sleeping. Didn't really work out. I mean, we have done it and we still do it sometimes, but it's hard work.
Yeah, it's definitely doesn't sound like a sustainable solution in many senses. Just imagine 20+ people from Sunday midnight to early morning of Monday. Definitely not something that you want to do often, and yeah, as I mentioned, not something that's sustainable. Before I ask Sven to announce the winner of these 3 strategies, kindly reminder, folks, just send your questions. So we already have first question, and we are well over 80 watchers of this session. send your question about AKS upgrade or just share your experience. So let's have quick discussion right after we finish with the slides. Now, announce the winner, please. Which strategies are you going for after all?
Well, we had these three options, these three strategies, and we had to take a step back and look at what did we gain from the different options and what did we not gain, and what was it that we were really reaching for when we started this process, right? We started out and we wanted an easy upgrade, low risk, minimal downtime. And we ended up with this infrastructure as code, immutable infrastructure. And then we saw that, like you see in this drawing here, Azure Application Gateway API Management, they are managed services. We don't have to upgrade them. Why don't we just keep them there? We have the code. That's really easy and they are stable there. But AKS, 2 AKS clusters, that was quite a bit of work. And the theory was that it was really low risk, but with all the testing, and you have to do a hard switch from the old cluster into the new one, which is it's risky, and you don't have a good feeling when you actually do it. So we look back at, we found out that the setup with node pools could actually help us, and it would be easier because we could, with node pools, we could actually upgrade the existing infrastructure, which is quite easy. And as Sven mentioned, we could also have multiple node pools. We could have multiple node pools of each type, which would give us a really low risk, since we would always have backup nodes for the workloads. And then we added another thing here, and that is the pod disruption budget. So what is pod disruption budget, you might ask? And that's a Kubernetes configuration on the deployments, which can guarantee us that a certain number of pods is always running. So, for example, if you have 3 replicas, 3 pods in your deployment, you can specify that at least 2 of these has to be running at all times. So back to the config server example, which caused us a huge problem, we could have specified that 2 of those had to be running at all times, and when the third one was down, the 2 had to be running, and Kubernetes is not allowed to stop them. This will, of course, stop the upgrade, but this will keep our services up and running. So then we had easy upgrade, low risk, and no downtime. So to summarize the journey we have here, what we started off with was an approach with a really high risk, the default 1 node pool, which was the only option at the time. AKS evolved and we evolved with new solutions, different options. We were able to lower the risk, try setup with adding some more node pools. We were doing immutable infrastructure, provisioning new resources. The risk was lower, but the complexity was a bit high and the cost was a bit high, and we didn't really find the perfect fit until we landed on this third approach, where we could, as we just mentioned now, we could get the risk down to a minimum, we get the easy upgrade, and we have no downtime in our upgrade process.
Great. Yeah, so upgrading AKS is a deep and wide topic, and we definitely only scratch the surface of all the complexities, where we can continue learning about all these flows, processes, experiences.
Yeah, so a while ago we wrote an ebook about this, about 30 pages, where we discussed everything that we discussed today here. But in addition, we researched also what an active AKS cluster actually means and how we technically can implement this. So all this is in this ebook. And in addition, we of course looked at the new service, which is Azure Container Apps, and found out how it works, or if it works basically for us or not, and why not for us, or why for us. Yeah, all that can you find here in this ebook, 30 pages long.
Awesome. And also I posted link to LinkedIn post that includes a link to this book, and let's keep this link that I just posted in the chat window as a connection point for all of us. If we don't have enough time to answer all questions, I see quite a few of them, we'll post answers there. We'll link all other related resources to the same post, and of course we'll link recording of this session to the same link. So keep it as a connection point between us, and of course send the LinkedIn connection request to Sven and Per, and let's all stay connected. Now we have are out of time, but if you have a few more minutes, stay with us. We are not finishing our streaming right now because we want to answer the questions. And let me check what do we have. Question number one. Emil is asking, how do you manage networking and integration with the third-party companies when you create an inactive AKS cluster?
Yeah, what we have is our partners that we use. They need to know, of course, about our integration with this, which is mainly Azure API management, and that was a process to communicate those new endpoints. But it's in place, and those two we have in place, and they work. For us, it's very stable right now.
Yeah, very interesting question. Ashish is asking, why AKS instead of simpler platforms like Azure Functions? I think you use both, right? But what could be your why did you choose AKS?
Basically, we use AKS because at that time, 4 years ago, I'm not sure if Azure Functions existed. I don't think so. However, today we are using Azure Functions, and a big part, maybe 5% or so, are actually using Azure Functions, and we are happy with it. But the thing is that you need some tooling also around there, and we do not necessarily have this completely in place, but we work a lot around AKS. That's what we have, and the people are happy with it. All this GitOps approach today. So that's why we use this basically.
Yeah. So it's not question AKS or Azure Functions, right? In many cases, it's and. Next question is, what is the tool used to create AKS? I'm a bit unsure about the scope of the question. Maybe it could be just more general about some tooling you have around AKS. Maybe some names, some interesting projects you can mention.
Well, right now we have explored different tools to create our AKS, and right now we are using Azure Bicep. We have Bicep code that we use to provision our AKS and everything surrounding it, from the resource group and VNet, public IPs, managed identities. We use that now to provision AKS. Previously, we have used ARM templates, we have used Pulumi, but last year we dived into Bicep, and it's working really well for us to provision AKS clusters on demand.
Awesome. So folks, have a look at Bicep. Next, it's not a question, but just feedback. Great session. Thank you very much. And the last question we have is from Daniel. Some Kubernetes versions have breaking changes. How do you handle the connected required upgrades, Helm, Prometheus, etc., if you don't run extra clusters to test everything separately?
Well, this is very true. This is difficult. We also think it's difficult, but there are tools you can use to check if there are breaking changes on the different objects in Kubernetes. But as I also just mentioned in the previous question, we have created a Bicep code base. So it's and we have created in a way so it's very easy for us to provision a new AKS cluster just for me as a lab cluster or a testing cluster. So even though we are upgrading our existing production cluster or test, I can create mine and I can test all these tools in advance. So we don't have to work on the live production clusters. So that's how we test out these new breaking changes, if it is Prometheus or the ingress controller.
Yeah, thank you very much, folks. I just want to post one more link to everyone. It's my LinkedIn profile. Let's stay connected, and that's actually everything what we had for today. Thank you very much, dear watchers, dear attendees. Thank you, Sven. Thanks, Per. Great session. And yeah, have a great Microsoft build. And yeah, use AKS and use and upgrade with confidence after learning from our technical experts.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.